You are listening to the Smart Betting Club podcast with me, your host, Peter Ling. Now, this podcast is sponsored by the Matchbook Betting Exchange, and you can find out more on what they offer smart bettors over at matchbook.com. And if you are interested in learning more what it takes to make a profit betting, please do check out my service for winning bettors over at smartbettingclub.com. Hello and welcome to the Smart Betting Club podcast. This is episode 86. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by Varun Sudhakar from the betting exchange and brokerage service BetDEX. Varun, it's great to have you on the pod. Quite a lot to explore today as regards BetDEX. But first of all, a little introduction to yourself for the listeners. Give them, if you will, a brief synopsis about you and your time in the betting world.
Yeah, hi Pete. Great to be here. I am Varun Sudhakar, the CEO and one of the co-founders here at BetDEX. We started BetDEX in late 2021, so we've been at this for a number of years now. Prior to that, my background in betting, I used to work at FanDuel for a few years, and this was from 2015 through 2018. But even before that, was a punter myself. I would say much more definitely of a casual punter and a retail focused, definitely more EV negative type punter, but was betting in the US from high school onwards, and then have continued to do so since.
I like the way, obviously, you've got the US accent, but you use the word punter, which is a very UK specific, because you're based in the UK now as well, right? So you kind of based across both countries.
Yeah, based in the UK. A lot of my colleagues are in the UK. We have worked with people in the UK for a long time. So yeah, I guess I'm somewhat of a mutt, if you will, when it comes to my background in betting geographically.
Okay, well, you got the language down, that's for sure. The betting parlance from the UK perspective, right? And in terms of your own betting, obviously, you're always interested in it. How did that then evolve? You know, we'll get into your work at FanDuel because that's fascinating. How did that then evolve from an interest into working in the industry?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'd been just betting as starting in high school, and then throughout college, et cetera, just for fun. It was largely through PPH bookies in the US. And then when I had my first job out of college, this was in banking, I actually ran the local FanDuel daily fantasy sports DFS league for the group that I was in. At that time, sports betting was not fully regulated, right? So you could only bet with bookies. And so daily fantasy sports was kind of the closest thing you kind of get to it, if you will, on a regulated basis. And so that's what we were doing. And I ran the local league at the bank that I was at, which was Barclays. And then when I left Barclays and was looking for other jobs, I was thinking about most banking analysts go into private equity or hedge fund type jobs. And I was certainly considering that route. It was actually very close to going to a few places there or pursuing a few options down that route. But ended up deciding to throw my hat in the ring to join FanDuel. This was in 2015, and frankly, just loved the product, loved what the company was building, and thought it was a good opportunity to kind of get into the gaming space from an operator perspective rather than just as a punter. Was fortunate enough to join the company in 2015, and that's how I got my start from a corporate perspective, if you will, in the betting world.
Yeah, so you liked the business so much that you went, using their service that you went and joined. That's great. It was obviously a passion and a hobby versus going into maybe private equity, which would be lucrative, but maybe not as you wouldn't be as passionate about. Your time at FanDuel overlapped with, I think at the end of it, if I've got your LinkedIn profile right, it was when PASPA was overturned, which enabled the opening up of legalized sports betting in America. And prior to that, FanDuel was kind of working in this DFS space and kind of, I guess, blurred lines on the regulatory side of it. It must have been quite an interesting time, especially towards the end of your time at FanDuel.
Yeah, no, it was definitely an interesting time. I will say it was probably the best professional working experience I've had in terms of just getting exposure to so many, different aspects of the industry, as well as different aspects of just corporate life. So when I joined FanDuel, this was in end of the summer of 2015. It was the hottest startup in America and just raised a bunch of money. It was Hypergrowth in terms of how fast we were growing in terms of both customers as well as volume. And then don't know if you remember, the fall of 2015 was when some people call it the advertising wars between us and DraftKings, when we were really just flooding the TV airwaves and just advertising against each other a bunch. Probably advertised a bit too much and had a number of different, shall we say, people in politics, attorney generals, et cetera, start to take a look at what we were building and what we were doing. And the role when I was there quickly changed to, I would say, much more of an operational role in terms of trying to figure out how to stabilize the company, how to get additional funding for the company while trying to convince a bunch of regulators that what daily fantasy sports was doing was legal under the laws that were written at that time. there's some rumors, et cetera, that PASPA was going to become repealed. And it was almost like we were, the pretty girl at the dance again.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, everyone wants to come back, wants to come talk to us, et cetera, because we had the leading brand in gaming in the US, which is obviously quite a big advantage. And you see that advantage kind of played out to today. And then that's when we ended up doing a deal with Flutter, ended up selling the company to Flutter right around when PASPA was repealed. And then Flutter obviously we partnered with them. And now, obviously, I have not been with FanDuel since 2018, but now FanDuel is the leading sportsbook in the US. And a big part of that was just due to the brand that we had built during the early years from that DFS time period.
No, really interesting. I noted that FanDuel obviously have got a big footprint in the industry. You're one of the major players, but also quite sharp. They'll take positions. So it's quite interesting to see. I mean, this is going off on a tangent, but obviously FanDuel is just really prominent now in the betting space from all perspectives. So, but we're not here to talk about them. As fascinating as that is, we're here to talk about what you do now at BetDEX. And I believe you founded this with Nigel Eccles, is that right? Who also was part of FanDuel and set that up. Tell us a little bit about what happened after you left FanDuel and why you set up BetDEX, and then we'll get into what it does there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I left FanDuel in 2018, worked at a few different earlier stage companies, shall I say, from 2018 onwards. Those companies were largely non-gaming related, but then came back to start BetDEX in late 2021. And so there's actually two co-founders. So one, as you mentioned, is Nigel Eccles. So Nigel is the chairman of BetDEX. Nigel was, some of the listeners of the pod may know, was the CEO of FanDuel till 2017 and was one of the founders there. Then our third co-founder is Stuart Toner, he's probably the most important person at the company. He's the one building everything, but he is our CTO, and he was actually the first engineer that we had ever hired at FanDuel. So he's had a wealth of experience on the tech side, and especially scaling systems and building wallet services and things of that nature. And so we came together to start BetDEX in late 2021. I think, for us, the impetus was a lot of us had background in the gaming space, whether it was, from a professional perspective or from a betting perspective or both. What we saw was just a lot of problems, shall I say, in the industry, which are quite consumer or not friendly to consumers. It's not just part of the problems that you see in the US, it's endemic. You see it actually even more in the UK, as well as other regions around the world. And, some of those problems are really around high fees, counterparty risk, which I'm sure a lot of listeners of this podcast have seen, where they'll go and place a bet and sometimes they just have to write off that bet, even if they won, because they can't get the bookies disappeared, or sometimes the book all of a sudden has decided to do a bunch of stringent KYC or AML, I'll say nonsensical checks, just because you've won a lot of money and making it difficult to go and get your money out. And so these were, we saw a number of these problems in the industry. And we also saw that winners were being, I would say, unfairly discriminated against, whether it's via stake limiting or premium charges. And we wanted to fix all those problems. So that's why we came together to start BetDEX.
Okay. Well, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here when you're talking about some of those topics. I think people will be nodding along as you speak there. So what is different then about what you're doing at BetDEX and how are you able to fix some of those problems?
BetDEX is, let me just very briefly describe it if you don't mind for the listeners. We're a betting exchange, similar to, say, a Betfair, but with a few key differences. One is all the transactions that we do are in crypto. Two is from a fee structure perspective, and I think this is one of the key differences versus others in the industry, such as Betfair. We do not do any premium charges or any call it discriminatory taxes such as that. Our fee structure is quite simple. It's just 3% of net profits, no matter the type of player that you are. And three, which I think is quite unique to what we've done, kind of the back end of what we've built, kind of this, think of it like the matching algorithm, et cetera. We have actually open sourced all of that technology and made it available for anyone else to go and build upon as well. And so that I think is actually quite unique and quite innovative in the betting space. I think the easiest way to kind of think about that and understand it, imagine if anyone could go and access the Betfair API. They could go and build their own applications on top of it. They could put liquidity onto it, et cetera. There are no call it restrictions necessarily around what you can or cannot do depending upon the type of player you are. And, Betfair can't just arbitrarily kind of limit your access or kick you off of that, right? So that's kind of what we've built with our backend as well, and something which I'm quite proud of.
Yeah, exactly. So at the moment, I suppose if you wanted to use Betfair's API, you'd have to be approved to do so before the different hoops on that front. Whereas for yourselves, because it's, as I understand, permissionless, and we don't need to get into the technological side of it, but it just allows anybody to tag on and start adding to that and generating extra liquidity for the exchange. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Anyone can build upon it. Anyone can build their own front end on top. People can trade into it themselves if they want on a programmatic basis. People can also show that liquidity on other platforms. So we actually, just a few weeks ago, we integrated with Molybet. So that's an example of kind of the power of what we have been doing and building.
And for those not clear, like Molybet is the leading, how would you describe it, like Asian brokerage service, if you like. I was going to ask you, from that, they're offering the access to the API like that, have you seen significant growth? Lots of people, or even if it's not lots of people, but some of the larger players start to come in and use BetDEX?
Yes, definitely. I think like Molybet was probably the first like a big integration that we've done. But with that integration, we see a lot more people accessing our liquidity and our prices via other channels, right? It's not just the exchange channel or our front end that they are accessing. And we expect to be doing a lot more of those integrations with other providers throughout the remainder of the year.
That's the back end, isn't it? So if you're just a lay person wanting to place a bet at value prices and just pay 3% commission, and you don't need to know any of that, right? You don't need to know how the sausage is getting made. You just need to see that available to you and go and take those prices. So it just shows you the difference, if you like, of what you're doing. And let me ask you then about some of the other things that are different about what you're doing. And we don't need to get technologically too deep on this one because perhaps it turns people off, but using blockchain technology, the advantages that offers compared to Betfair or other competitors who don't use that.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this, very, very high level. I think, at its most, call it basic, by using like crypto payments, it's just an alternative payment method, which I think is much faster and cheaper and transparent to the user. And it's also non-intrusive. You don't need to go through a whole host of bank checks or anything at all like that to go and process the crypto payment. If you have the crypto payment, you can just deposit it with one click to us. You immediately show up in your player wallet. And where this also really helps with is on withdrawals as well. When you withdraw money, you click and you say, do you want to take that money out back to your wallet? You can actually track that payment, like literally step by step, and see where it is, track it by the microsecond. And that payment will go, and typically within a matter of a few seconds, it's come back kind of directly into your crypto wallet, and it's your money to do what you will with. And so I think that is just in terms of reducing payment friction, blockchain, to me, it's an absolute game changer to the industry. And you've seen that power the growth of not just us, but a lot of other companies in this space.
Yeah.
We can go kind of further down the rabbit hole. But the one other big advantage I would say with, building on blockchain and blockchain technology is if you are interacting with platforms which are built kind of purely on the blockchain technology, it's actually possible to interact with that technology with your own wallet. And so you actually can kind of eliminate custody risk because you can maintain custody of your funds at all times. And so that's something which I think is quite interesting, especially for users who may have experienced counterparty risk where they go and aren't able to go and get their money back or their money out when the match settles because of whoever the counterparty that they're using is. That's a risk that can be negated with blockchain.
Of course, yeah. So enhanced trust and enhanced overview of where the money is, the speed and process of withdrawals. We'll probably talk a little bit more about benefit later on. I'm really keen to get into, well, you do two different things, right? You've got the exchange and the brokerage, but let's talk about the exchange. What kind of sports and markets are you offering at the moment? And, what kind of liquidity are you seeing on some of those which are most popular?
We offer most sports except for racing at the moment. And so you will see all American sports. So you'll see all the major professional sports. We also do college basketball, college football. From a European perspective, we also we offer all the major soccer leagues. I would say we even offer tier 2, sometimes even tier 3 soccer leagues. We also do offer, outside of NBA, we'll offer EuroLeague basketball as well. I started to offer more recently MMA and rugby. We also offer tennis. And then we have started trialing a few cricket markets, but I think you will see our cricket offering expand quite significantly, especially towards the beginning of the second half of this year.
Great. It's good to know there's quite a lot of markets there. And how about that liquidity you're seeing? So obviously you don't want to offer too many markets too quickly because you'll have lots which maybe aren't filling up as you would like. In terms of let's say some of the big markets like football markets, the soccer market, 1x2, or for example, some of the tennis ones or basketball, are you seeing comparable growth and liquidity to other exchanges? How is it shaping up?
I would say so. So most markets, we have what I call between $5,000 to $10,000 of anchor liquidity on the major markets that you had mentioned. So anchor liquidity just being, if the user just goes to the screen, how much liquidity do they kind of just go and kind of see on that market?
Yeah.
But also quite often what you see is there's probably a lot of liquidity which isn't showing up on the screen as well, because sometimes a user or a market maker may not want to completely show their hand at the outset, right? So you may see $3,000 at, I don't know, 1.46, but then what you might see is if the user goes and matches at $3,000, all of a sudden another $3,000 or $4,000 appears, right, at 1.46, because the market maker is willing to take more exposure there, but just didn't want to fully show their hand on it. That's usually what we see in terms of liquidity numbers.
Yeah, that all makes sense. If you want to take a large sum, you don't always want to show your hand, like you say, and I do see that regularly on certain exchanges. So as you grow and bring people into that, you talked about Molybet there, but that's the challenge, isn't it, for exchanges, is sourcing liquidity. Some exchanges have built their own trading arms, others obviously maybe different options, and you're almost betting against them sometimes. How have you, obviously you got the API, but is that still a constant challenge of how you can continually grow the liquidity? The chicken and egg conundrum, isn't it? Until, liquidity doesn't come until you have customers, and customers don't come until you have liquidity.
That's exactly right. I mean, when we started, it was us just working with third-party market makers, just go and seed the markets, right? Like you need to have a full shop window, if you will, for people to come and place bets. It's hard to people to come to an empty store and call it just go and interact. And so that's how we initially came and initially started building liquidity. And we still work with and partner with many of these third-party market makers who come and seed these markets. As you mentioned, obviously the third-party integrations do help to bring in liquidity as well. And so we do see especially a fair amount of taker volume coming in through integrations such as Molybet, or even through our own front end, which is betdex.com. We also see people who integrate with our back end as well. And sometimes they will, I'd say more call it the Bet Angel or Grust type users will sometimes come and, just trade programmatically through our backend as well. So that's kind of where the three main ways that we're seeing liquidity forming on our ecosystem.
Okay. And can I ask you about horse racing? Because obviously a lot of people listening to this take an interest in it. We're recording this a week after Cheltenham. I think you went there last week. It's probably not from not wanting it, but are there certain challenges why you can't offer racing?
Oh, sure. It's a very simple answer. From a technological perspective, we don't have the capability to do dead heats or reduction factors just yet. So that is on our roadmap. And so that is something that we're hoping to tackle later this year. That's, I would say, one of the main reasons why we don't have racing. I will say what's ahead of that is in-play though. So we're going to be launching in-play first, and that will be probably later this summer is when we'll be launching that. And then things like racing would probably be on the roadmap after that.
This podcast is sponsored by the Matchbook Betting Exchange. When it comes to betting exchanges, Matchbook has been my personal go-to for some time now. Using horse racing as an example, they've offered the best prices on the most runners this year, which can make a big difference to your bottom line. Plus, with an industry-leading score of 4.2 on Trustpilot, you know you're in safe hands. Download the Matchbook Betting Exchange app or go to matchbook.com today. And if you enter the code SBC150, that's SBC150 on sign up, you can get commission-free for your first 150 days, which can give you even more value. If you need to place a larger or more bespoke bet, or are indeed a corporate or operator client, their brokerage service is excellent and available 365 days a year. For more details, email the team at brokerage@matchbook.com. Matchbook Betting Exchange is for bettors who know better. Great. Okay, so that's the exchange. So you can see the growth of that. You can see there's a roadmap. There's obviously potential to add extra markets. And obviously, as customer base grows, you'll be able to do that. Then you've also got the brokerage service as well. Tell me a little bit about why you're offering that platform and its appeal.
So the brokerage service is something we launched in late Q4 of 2024. I mean, it's been growing like wildfire for us. We always knew we wanted to launch a brokerage, but this kind of, I'd say, got prioritized due to more inbound interest. And basically what we saw was there were people who were trying to get large bets down and were unable to due to a variety of reasons. And so that's why we decided to go and launch that service to see whether we're able to go and help facilitate them. In terms of if you think about kind of the type of person who is doing this, we're really seeing, say, three types of customers. So one type of customers is really just more sharp flow or syndicate type flow, where people are trying to go, they have an edge, they want to go and try to get a large amount of money down without moving the market and before their edge is gone. So we've been able to really go and really go and service those customers and help them process bets, whether they're $5,000 or $50,000. We also see just whales sometimes, just large punters who may want to place $100,000 or $200,000 down on an EPL match. For whatever reason, they aren't able to or don't want to with the current book that they are using. And we're able to go and really service those customers. And we're also able to go and service corporates. So like corporate customers and operators who are really looking to go and hedge. We're able to go and help them, hedge any unwanted exposure that they may have, which invariably then results in them being able to go and provide a much better product with much better pricing to their customers. And so those are kind of the three main groups of customers that we've had. And yeah, as mentioned, brokerage service, it's been growing like wildfire for us since we've launched it.
Okay, can you give any insight into maybe some examples of competitive odds or what you've been able to offer in terms of bets or markets?
The brokerage, in terms of the markets that we offer, it's similar to what I'd mentioned as relates to the exchange. So most sports except for racing, and like market-wise, we do most markets except for quarter-line Asian handicaps at the moment, but we will do half-line. That's no problem. In terms of I'll just give you an example of some of the bets. Let me just pull this up from this past weekend. And so these are more, I'll call it like sharper flow type bets, but we placed a bet on Nice to win at halftime. We were able to place 42,000 of that for 2.05. We did a Stuttgart versus Leverkusen cards over 4.5. We did 10 grand on that at 1.7. We did Den Bosch versus Ajax reserves. The Den Bosch money line, we did 25,000 at 1.81. So pretty decent like size stakes that we're talking about for more like in some cases tier 2 type or tier 3 soccer leagues. Generally, the pricing for these type of things is like a few clicks off of Pinnacle or Sync. So I'll say probably 3 to 4 clicks off of there. I think, if you're someone who's betting on a, let's say, more regular market, like just a EPL 1x2 market, like our pricing will be, especially for like a $10,000 or $20,000 bet, it'll be right where Sync is, sometimes even better. If you're placing a $200,000 bet, we'll be probably anywhere between like 5 to 7 clicks off of where Pinnacle or Sync is on like an EPL 1x2 market.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's impressive for someone like Nice reserve or Ajax reserves and big sums. It's insightful to know like what you're able to offer. So effectively, you're appealing to people who want to bet smaller sums. They go use the exchange. They can find good odds and competitive odds in many of those larger markets, and then if they are like want a bespoke service and want larger sums, whether they are hedging off or whether they are just different types of people wanting to move large action for whatever variety of reasons, there's options there. So how does that actually work with the brokerage platform? Is it just pick up the phone or send a message? How does it actually work in terms of starting to use it?
The way we do it is via WhatsApp or Telegram groups. Once you come in on board with us, we'll set up a WhatsApp or Telegram groups. We'll have our team and our team of brokers in that group. We'll have the customer will be in that group, and the customer can go and send a bet, like bet request. So I'll give you someone might decide to come and say, tonight I want to bet on the Heat money line on NBA. I want $200,000 on the Heat money line. What's the best price that you can get me? Then we'll go and speak to a variety of our counters and our outs. And then we'll come back and tell the customer what the price is. If the customer likes that price, they can take it, and we'll confirm it with the customer as well as the counterparty. If the customer doesn't like it, they can say pass. And so that's how the bet gets confirmed and recorded. And then in terms of actually then after the bet is confirmed in WhatsApp or Telegram, post that fact will go, and in the back end we'll go and record it on the platform, so the customer will always have access to their betting history, their statement, and all of that. Most of the actual conversation and price discovery, if you will, all occurs in WhatsApp or Telegram groups.
But generally, the customer have a general idea of what price they actually want. If they're betting at high stakes, they'll have very specific requirements, no doubt, and minimum options and prices, etc. That's interesting. And it's fascinating to see there's been significant growth in that, even though it was launched 4 or 5 months ago. And I guess that all feeds into the exchange, right? So you're able to use some of that across both platforms to help with their market growth.
Yeah, no, 100%. All the bets are eventually go and are recorded on the exchange as well. It sounds like it's 2 separate businesses, but it's really just the same business. It's almost like 2 sides of the same coin, right? One is serving just smaller punters, but then the other one is serving just larger bettors. So
obviously, as an exchange, there's some different options there. But the fact that you take crypto, is it only crypto at the moment, or you're also taking fiat? How does that actually break down at the moment?
It's only crypto at the moment. We take a few different types of crypto. So we'll do Bitcoin, we'll do USDT, USDC, Sol as well. So we'll take a few different types of crypto, but it is only crypto at the moment.
And how are you finding that in terms of uptake? Is there a lot of resistance or fear of using crypto? Are you finding more and more customers are becoming more familiar with it and willing to try it, if you like?
Over the last few years, there's definitely been an uptake and increase in terms of the number of customers who are willing to try crypto or even already have crypto. I think just in general, crypto has become much more, is starting to become more and more prevalent just in the wider economy. That being said, there's still customers who are hesitant and who fear using crypto. And so what we've been working on in the background is trying to enable those customers to come in and just deposit kind of with their bank card. But then in the background, we will do the conversion and processing in crypto. And so that's where all that sausage making, if you will, is kind of like taken away from the customer. So from them, it's somewhat of a similar experience to what they might have on other platforms, perhaps with less bank checks. But that's still in the works. It's not released yet, but that is something that we are working on.
Okay, great. So someone would be able to come in, use their traditional fiat currency and purchase crypto through you effectively, and then start to bet with that. So they don't even need to
Exactly
have it already, right? Which makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just curious because obviously as we see the world, financial world on that side opening up, I've talked in the past to other people. Obviously, we've got a different administration in the US now and more crypto friendly, no doubt. Like we've seen like firms like Kalshi and other firms that are using it to push boundaries, maybe a bit like what FanDuel were doing 10 years ago now.
Yes.
On that front, do you get a sense that that's going to become easier or become more widespread?
I mean, with the current administration, definitely. I mean, I think you see, in the US, like, you see the Trumps, like, the tweeting about
His own coin.
this and even pushing some of these platforms, right? Like, so, yeah, it's definitely, for better or worse, shall I say, it's definitely going to become more prevalent, at least in the US. And I think just by virtue of that alone, other countries and jurisdictions will, whether they want it or not, will be forced to kind of deal with it, right? And so it is going to become more and more, I think, open and widespread. You even see it in the countries like, I think, like Argentina, was it Ecuador? There was another South American country which actually adopted Bitcoin as their national standard. So
I think that was El Salvador.
Oh, it was El
I think that
Salvador.
was
Yes, correct.
yeah.
I was
El
close.
Salvador. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like I only see it kind of going in one direction, if you will. But I think like there's a lot of, on the crypto side, there's still a lot of significant kind of UX problems that need to be solved for it to go truly mainstream.
I agree. So the other thing you touched on earlier is that it provides a degree of transparency because I'm not sure if it's you speaking about this or somebody else who has a similar background, but there's a trace, isn't there? When you deposit crypto, you can trace the funds and the source of those funds and where it's been originating from, more so than you could do with cash or money in a fiat currency, because it could have put cash into my bank and or there could be no particular trail for it. So it does provide more oversight of that. Are you finding like that is helpful for yourself in terms of dealing with obviously probably some of the regulatory or other requirements of you to go like we can have more oversight of cryptocurrency than we can do with fiat currency?
Yes and no. Like I say that because initially regulators don't understand that. When you go to them and you pitch them and you tell them, hey, this blockchain thing is actually way more transparent than what you use right now, it takes a while for them to really pick up on that and understand that. So there is a significant, I'd say, education process that needs to occur where you kind of work hand in hand with whoever the third party is, whether it's a regulator or a bank provider, whomever it might be, to tell them that this is actually more beneficial than your current processes. And this is how that this can help go and ameliorate or even solve any of the AML concerns, et cetera, that you have. But once you do kind of get past that initial hurdle or initial hump, it's like a light bulb has gone off in their head. And then at that point, they become much more open and willing to go and explore your new technology.
Yeah. So once you get that conversation and people start to understand it, then doors open. And is that one of the barriers to growth for you to a certain extent? Obviously, dealing with some of those, having those conversations and ensuring that everyone understands like what you're trying to do and kind of this is the way the world is moving. Are you going to help us to build our business in relation to it, or is there going to be some friction? Talk me through that perspective in terms of its growth requirements.
It's going to be a slog, right? It almost in some ways brings me back to like when I was at FanDuel, when we were doing like daily fantasy and then even like sports betting, like the regulation there is state by state. And you have to go through and with each state, you kind of have to fight and educate and negotiate and, and kind of get to kind of where you need to get to from a regulatory perspective. If we were to go and do that same thing here, I feel like it would be a very similar challenge, right? Where we would have to go and try to go and educate almost each regulator as to what we're doing with the technology. And so there is a significant hurdle to go and do that. And so I think that is why you've seen from a licensing perspective, we've been very intentional about our licensing strategy around where we go and get licensing.
But you are in Ireland, as I understand it. Is that right? So
we are in Ireland, yes.
Okay. And it's a matter of watch this space to see where else
Exactly. Yeah, we're in a number of jurisdictions around the world, I should say, Ireland being one of them.
I also want to ask you, because I know we were talking prior to the podcast, you're working at the moment on an improved back end, and that's due to come out relatively soon, maybe not long after this podcast goes out. Tell me a little bit about that and what enhancements the customer will see as part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are working on a new backend. It's in some ways a rewrite of our existing system that will hopefully launch in the next few months. There's going to be a number of benefits to it, depending upon who the end user is. So one, it will enable us to offer in-play markets in a much more reliable manner. I'm really excited for that, especially for people who are coming in and interacting with our liquidity on bettdex.com. It's also going to enable us to offer much more liquid markets. So I think the amount of money that you see on the site is going to increase quite dramatically. And three, I think for people who aren't as familiar with blockchain or as familiar with crypto technology, it will enable them we're building a new API layer on top where you'll be able to go and talk to that API layer to build your own application or to integrate directly with the liquidity without having to really get into the ins and outs of the blockchain technology. We're trying to make it as simple as integrating with, say, the Betfair API or something like that. And so really excited for all of those things to kind of come to fruition in the next few months with this new backend that we're launching.
That sounds good. And I think it's especially encouraging for many of the people I talk to, maybe are more part-time or just are skirting around the edges of maybe dealing with crypto or some of the different technology that you use. It's to dial down and make it so much more usable and user-friendly. And, I hear people talking in depth about different networks and coins, and it can feel like a foreign language. And I understand why it puts people off. So that ability to explain it in simple languages and remove all of those friction points, I think is very welcome. If I can then, just to wrap up, I suppose, moving forward, let's say we talk again in 12 months' time or even 2 years' time, what's your plans and hopes for BetDEX? We've got the sandbox, the new V2 that you're working on, but what would you like to be in a couple of years' time in terms of BetDEX?
When we had originally started, our vision was to become and create a singular kind of liquidity pool for sports betting. And that's kind of like what we wanted to do from I'll call it like a first principles perspective. And I think you're starting to see us starting to make headways to that, right? We're connecting different customers and different liquidity pools, whether it's via our BetDEX front end or our back end or the brokerage. And so I would love to see us make obviously a lot more progress on that front. It's from where I'm sitting, it feels like, a lot of the pieces are starting to kind of fall into place. And so I'm really excited to see where we go from a growth perspective as it relates to just getting a lot more customers on board, whether it's from a B2B or a B2C perspective.
Well, I mean, I welcome all competition to the exchange market. It's been stifled or it's been dominated for such a long time. And obviously, we've seen a reduction in interest usage of Betfair. But obviously, the money is there and it wants to be in the exchange market. And platforms like BetDEX hopefully will encourage that. And the outcome is better odds and more competitive and better service for consumers and for bettors and the people listening to podcasts like this. So, yeah, that's why I'm all on board. And I hope that it's able to grow and to become more and more used by different people. And for those people who have questions, I always ask this, but I imagine from this podcast, they might well. How can they get in touch with you? How can they find more about BetDEX?
You can find me on Twitter. It's @svarun91. I can also provide my email, which is varun@betdex.com.
Okay, and I understand there's a special promo code for listeners to this podcast who wish to sign up with BetDEX. Do you want to tell the listeners about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone who goes to promos.betdex.com/SBC and signs up, you'll be getting 0% commission for the first 120 days.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate your time and for explaining more about BetDEX. And I wish you all the very best with BetDEX and its growth over the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. It was a pleasure to be on the podcast.